Welcome to Beyond the Lens, where history comes alive, and every documentary takes you deeper than ever before. History isn't just written in books. It's carved into ancient ruins, hidden beneath the oceans. For breathtaking this is a journey beyond the lens.
Look at Dubai today. It is a dense corridor of glass and steel, operating at the outer limits of modern civil engineering. But if you stood at this exact geographic coordinate less than a century ago, the environment offered almost nothing. There were no rivers, no forests, and no fertile soil. Summer temperatures routinely crossed 45 degrees Celsius, and fresh water was incredibly scarce. For the small fishing settlement that existed here, survival meant looking to the sea. They dove for natural pearls. A diver would hold his breath for nearly 2 minutes, descending 20 meters into the Gulf, with only a stone tied to his feet to pull him down. It was a brutal physical grind with massive fatality rates. Then, 2 economic shocks destroyed that entire way of life. In the 1930s, Japanese innovators figured out how to artificially culture pearls, instantly flooding the market. At the exact same time, the global Great Depression wiped out whatever luxury demand was left. When the economy collapsed, it left the region with a deep-seated institutional anxiety towards single commodity markets. The memory of the pearl trade's disappearance dictated that any future success would have to be insulated from the volatility of a single product. Decades later, in 1966, the struggling settlement found a second lifeline. They discovered oil. The cash from petroleum exports flowed in quickly, but oil comes with a strict physical limitation. It is a finite resource. Every barrel pumped out the ground pushed the region one step closer to an inescapable expiration date. This created a very specific ticking clock. The central challenge for modern Dubai was clear. How do you take a temporary pile of cash and build an economy capable of surviving long after the last barrel of oil is sold? The answer came from the ruler at the time, Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum. Unlike leaders in neighboring regions, he operated on the strict assumption that the oil wealth would run out in his lifetime. He made an aggressive move. He took out massive loans to physically dredge and widen the Dubai Creek. Financial advisors looked at the astronomical costs of this infrastructure project and called it reckless. They argued the tiny emirate simply couldn't afford the debt. He ignored the warnings. The dredging allowed much larger, heavy cargo vessels to dock directly in the city, shifting regional maritime trade routes straight to their doorstep. By the time the debt was repaid, the creek was full of ships that had previously bypassed the region. It demonstrated that capital spent on physical bottlenecks could generate more revenue than the cash itself was worth. Other nations in the region were taking a very different approach. They treated their raw petroleum exports as their primary industry, spending the immediate profits on consumer luxuries and domestic subsidies. Dubai took the profits from that 1966 oil discovery and funneled them straight into concrete. They built international airports, extensive highway networks, and modern hospitals. This chart illustrates what economists call an economic multiplier. By strictly routing that raw revenue away from immediate consumption and into transport and logistics, Dubai created a physical environment that forced secondary industries to develop. By prioritizing ports and highways over immediate comfort, Dubai engineered a system that would continue generating wealth even if the oil wells went completely dry. In the late 1970s, the leadership proposed their most massive project yet. They decided to carve the largest man-made harbor in the world directly out of the desert, creating the Jebel Ali port. International observers openly mocked the idea. The sheer scale and the financial cost of carving a gigantic deep-water port into a barren coastline seemed completely absurd to outside investors. The physical port was only half the strategy. They surrounded it with the Jebel Ali Free Zone. Here, they eliminated the friction of international trade, removing corporate taxes and allowing foreigners to own 100% of their businesses. The financial incentives worked exactly as intended. Thousands of global corporations, eager for a tax-free hub between Europe and Asia, rushed to set up their headquarters inside the zone. They didn't have a natural river system or a historic trading position. By combining a colossal physical harbor with aggressive, frictionless corporate policies, Dubai manufactured a geographic trade advantage entirely from scratch. Today, that port looks like this. Jebel Ali operates at a staggering density, serving as a primary node connecting over 150 countries. Dubai now serves as a central hub in the global supply chain. While petroleum once drove the region, today the city's economic weight is carried by the movement of containers and the transit of international cargo. The oil beneath the sand was a temporary catalyst, but the infrastructure it funded created a permanent trade advantage. The city escaped the fate of the pearl divers by turning a finite resource into a global machine. Before it was a global metropolis, this land was defined by extreme heat, shifting sand, and nearly zero natural water sources. Surviving here meant enduring one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Even into the late 20th century, Dubai remained a relatively modest settlement. Its people relied on traditional maritime commerce, pearl diving, and local trade along the creek just to keep the local economy moving. The discovery of oil brought an influx of wealth, but it also introduced a ticking clock. The city's leaders ran the numbers and realized their reserves were comparatively small and would inevitably run dry. To prevent a complete collapse once the wells emptied, the government realized they had to pivot. They decided to manufacture global relevance from scratch, turning a remote stretch of sand into a mandatory international destination. Building extravagant landmarks was a calculated, necessary step. It was the only way to engineer long-term economic survival in a region that offered almost nothing naturally. The blueprint relied heavily on luxury tourism, which immediately hit a geographic wall. Tourists want beaches, and Dubai simply did not have enough pristine coastline to support a massive resort industry. The first part of the solution was to build something the world couldn't ignore. Opening in 1999, the sail-shaped Burj Al Arab was designed specifically to give the city an instantly recognizable premium identity. To solve the coastline shortage, engineers manually dredged and dumped millions of tons of sand directly into the sea. The resulting Palm Jumeirah artificially added miles of new beachfront property to the map. Visitors arrived in massive numbers, and quickly after them, multinational corporations began establishing their regional headquarters to tap into the expanding market. Handling this massive influx required serious logistics. The city poured resources into expanding Dubai International Airport, transforming it into a vital connecting node between East and West. By physically expanding their borders into the ocean and constructing highly visible monuments, they successfully separated the city's economic identity from its underground oil reserves. Once they had the world's attention, the leadership decided to solidify their position by claiming the absolute limit of vertical engineering. Starting in 2004, construction on the Burj Khalifa faced immense technical barriers. Engineers had to pump specialized concrete mixtures that wouldn't cure too quickly in the desert heat, while also designing a core that could withstand extreme high-altitude wind shear. The sheer physical labor required was staggering. A workforce of over 12,000 people operated in continuous day and night shifts to keep the project moving upward. In January 2010, the doors finally opened. The structure stood at a towering 828 meters, officially becoming the tallest building on Earth. By successfully executing a project of this magnitude, the city proved its engineering capabilities and cemented a reputation for delivering on promises that initially seemed entirely fictional. However, the rapid expansion faced a severe stress test. In 2008, the global financial crisis caused credit markets worldwide to freeze. The local impacts were immediate and harsh. Property values plummeted overnight, and half-finished skyscrapers sat dormant as major construction sites locked their gates. International investors quickly pulled back their capital, leading analysts to conclude that the entire economic boom had been a fragile, debt-fueled bubble about to burst. A total collapse was prevented through a massive strategic financial intervention from neighboring Abu Dhabi. This influx of capital stabilized the local economy, allowing the stalled projects to slowly come back online. Navigating through the 2008 crash forced the city to restructure its debt and tighten regulations. Coming out the other side intact proved to the global market that their economy had genuine durability. Today, the strategy has evolved. Having successfully built the physical infrastructure, the government is now focused on securing intellectual capital and future-proofing the economy. You can see this shift in their newer developments. Structures like the Museum of the Future represent a pivot away from purely functional real estate toward dedicated spaces for global technological research. This chart illustrates the economy's transformation. The massive 1990s oil revenue band compresses into a tiny sliver by the 2020s, replaced by growth in tourism, technology, and renewables. Zooming into the technology band, investments focus heavily on artificial intelligence, robotics, and autonomous smart cities. To power this new grid without falling back on fossil fuels, they are covering vast stretches of the surrounding desert with massive solar parks, literally turning the sun into their new primary resource. Starting with nothing but sand and a temporary reserve of oil, a small trading post systematically broke its own geographic limitations. It clearly proves that with enough calculated risk and capital, a city can fully engineer its own destiny.